My wife secretly gambling away $300, $0 of our inheritance, then lying about it until I found the hidden accounts. And now she's suing me over the house we inherited from my parents' estate. I never thought I'd be the guy to catch his wife cheating on him, especially not in such a brutal way. I mean, I always thought Emily was the perfect wife, smart, beautiful, ambitious. We had a good life, or so I thought. But everything changed the day I found out she was screwing around behind my back with some guy named Jake from her office. That revelation hit me like a ton of bricks, and the craziest part, it wasn't just the affair. I also stumbled onto a mountain of lies, hidden bank accounts, and a secret gambling habit that she'd been hiding for years. Honestly, the whole thing felt like I was living in a bad movie. We'd been together for 8 years. We met in college, got married right after graduation, and for a long time I truly believed we had a solid partnership. I was the guy who worked hard, paid the bills, and thought we were building a future. Emily was always a little bitchy, sure, but I figured that was just her personality. She was ambitious and a little manipulative, but I loved her, or at least I thought I did. It started subtly, small things. She'd be late more often, coming home smelling like perfume I didn't recognize. She'd brush off my questions with a dismissive attitude, saying I was paranoid or jealous. But I was. I noticed her phone was always locked, and she'd get defensive whenever I tried to look at it. I also noticed her spending habits got weird. More dinners out, expensive clothes, jewelry I knew she didn't need. But I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was just stressed or wanted to treat herself after a long week. Then, about 3 months ago, I started noticing strange bank statements showing large withdrawals from our joint account. I asked her about it, and she told me it was just some investment she was doing on the side, that she was trying to be responsible with our money. She lied so smoothly I almost believed her, but I didn't feel right about it. I started digging around, and that's when I found the hidden accounts. She'd set up secret bank accounts under fake names, funneling away hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's when my stomach really dropped. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. All that money, our inheritance from my parents' estate, vanished into some gambling pit she kept hidden. I found receipts for thousands of dollars in online poker and sports betting sites. She had been lying to me about everything, telling me she was saving for a house or a vacation, but it was all a lie. She'd gambled away over $300, $0 of our inheritance, and I only discovered it because I randomly checked our shared accounts one night after she went to bed. I saw a suspicious transfer, and I started digging deeper. That's when I saw the emails. She'd been secretly chatting with Jake, telling him how much she hated me, how she was planning to leave me once she got her hands on more of the inheritance. She'd been having sex with him, I'm sure of it, and all the while she was lying to my face, pretending everything was fine. I felt sick. I felt betrayed on every level. How could she do this? How could she lie about something so huge? I was furious, but also heartbroken. I'd trusted her. I thought we had a future, and now I realized she'd been playing me from the start. I confronted her the next day. I waited until she was in the kitchen, making her usual snide remarks about how I was paranoid or accusatory. I threw the evidence on the table, screenshots of the bank accounts, the emails, the gambling receipts. Her face twisted into a sneer. She told me I was overreacting, that I was insecure, that I was making things up. She said I was imagining the affair, that I was jealous and paranoid, and that I had no proof. But I had it all. The proof was staring me in the face. She got angry, of course. She called me names, accused me of invading her privacy, said I was crazy, and that I was ruining everything. She said I should be grateful she was even still with me, that I was lucky to have her. But I wasn't feeling grateful. I was feeling numb, betrayed, and furious. I told her I knew everything, about the affair, the gambling, the lies. Her eyes widened for a second, then she scoffed and told me I was losing my mind. That was the moment I realized I was really alone in this. She didn't care. She'd been lying to me all along, and now she was trying to gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. The emotional fallout was intense. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My first reaction was anger, pure, boiling rage. I wanted to scream at her, to shake her, to make her admit what she'd done. But underneath that, I felt a deep sadness. I'd lost the woman I thought I knew. I'd lost trust, respect, everything. I sat there staring at her, trying to process what I'd just uncovered, and I realized I'd never feel safe around her again. Not after she'd lied about the money, cheated on me, and tried to paint herself as the victim. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just let this slide. So I started planning. I knew I had to get to the bottom of her secrets, but I also knew I had to be careful. Emily was manipulative, and I didn't want her to spin this around or turn the tables on me. I began collecting more evidence, talking to a lawyer, and figuring out what my options were. I was angry, yes, but I was also determined. I wasn't going to let her get away with destroying everything we had built. I needed to think about my next move, whether that meant fighting for the house, taking her to court, or just walking away. Whatever it was, I knew my life was about to change forever. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't just confront her and hope for the best. Emily's a smart woman. She's always been good at twisting things around, making herself look innocent no matter what she's done. I had to be strategic. I started by hiring a private investigator, someone who could dig into her financials further, track her movements, and maybe even catch her in the act if she was still sneaking around. I figured if I was going to get real proof, I needed someone who knew how to do it without her catching on. While waiting for the pie to come through, I also spent hours poring over every piece of financial evidence I had. I wanted to understand how deep her lies ran, how much she had stolen, and what her plans might be if she's really been cheating on me with Jake. I found out she'd been seeing him for over a year, meeting him late at night, going to hotels, doing God knows what. It was disgusting. She'd been lying about her whereabouts, claiming she was working late or visiting her sister. Meanwhile, she was screwing another man and gambling away our inheritance. The pie finally came back with some shocking findings. Emily had been funneling money into an offshore account in the Caribbean. I couldn't believe it. I'd suspected she was hiding something, but seeing the proof was another level. The account had over $150, $0 in it, and she transferred money there every few weeks for months. The pie also caught her meeting Jake in a hotel downtown, late at night. It was clear she was still lying, still hiding her tracks. That was the moment I realized I had to do something drastic. I couldn't just threaten her or argue anymore. I needed to act, and fast. I decided to meet with a lawyer specializing in marital and financial disputes. I laid everything out: the secret accounts, her gambling, the affair, the offshore money. The lawyer told me that I had a strong case for divorce and for reclaiming the inheritance she'd stolen. But I also wanted to send her a message, not just for me, but for anyone who might think they can get away with lying and cheating their way through life. I started drafting a plan to expose her publicly, to make her face the consequences of what she'd done. I knew she'd fight dirty, so I prepared myself for a battle. I also realized I had to be careful about the house we inherited from my parents. It was in her name too, and she was already threatening to sue me for part of it, claiming she had a right to half the estate. That's when I learned she'd been secretly filing legal documents, trying to claim ownership of the house based on some flimsy argument that she contributed equally to our marriage. I felt my blood boil. She was trying to turn everything around on me, saying I was the one who was unfaithful, that I was the one who had hidden money. I knew better. I had all the evidence. I decided I'd fight her in court, and I'd fight dirty if I had to. I wanted her to see that she couldn't just lie her way out of this. I also started documenting everything: texts, emails, bank statements, the pie's reports. I needed to make sure I had a mountain of proof to back up my claims. Meanwhile, Emily was acting even more bitchy, more entitled. She throw tantrums, scream at me for accusing her of everything, call me paranoid and possessive. She denied everything, of course, but I could see the panic behind her eyes. She knew I was closing in. Sometimes she'd try to guilt-trip me, saying I was ruining our marriage, that I was the reason she was stressed out and depressed. But I wasn't falling for her bullshit anymore. I saw her for what she was: a manipulative, selfish woman who'd lied and cheated her way through life, and now she was trying to gaslight me into backing down. One night, I caught her sneaking her phone out of her purse when she thought I wasn't looking. I looked through it and found more messages with Jake, more secret plans, more lies. She'd even been texting him during our supposed date. Nights pretending she was with her sisters or friends. I started feeling sick, like I was living in some nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The betrayal was so deep, I wondered how I ever trusted her, how I ever believed she was the woman I loved. I realized I had to get out of this toxic situation. I couldn't keep living in doubt, in fear, knowing that she was out there cheating and gambling away everything we had. I made a decision. I was going to divorce her, take back the house, and recover as much of the inheritance as I could. I knew it wouldn't be easy. She'd fight me tooth and nail, probably try to accuse me of all kinds of things to turn the tables. But I couldn't let her win. I refused to be the victim of her lies and manipulations anymore. So I prepared myself mentally and legally. I started talking to friends who knew about her gambling addiction, and I reached out to a financial advisor to figure out how to secure my assets. I also started planning how I'd confront her in court, how I'd prove her fraud, her affair, her betrayal. I knew this was just the beginning of a long, ugly fight, but I was ready. I had to be, because if I didn't stand up now, she'd keep taking everything from me, my trust, my money, my peace of mind. And I'd be damned if I let her do that. After I had all the evidence lined up, the offshore account details, the emails with Jake, the secret bank statements, and the Pies reports, I knew it was time to take things to the next level. I couldn't just sit around confronting her repeatedly and hope she'd change her ways. Emily was a master manipulator, and I'd learned that the hard way. If I wanted to win, I had to act smart, precise, and ruthless. So I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer, one of the best in town, and laid everything out. We went through all the evidence I had gathered, and he confirmed what I already suspected. I had a solid case for divorce, for reclaiming the inheritance, and for legal action against her for fraud and embezzlement. The offshore account alone was enough to get her in serious trouble, and the fact that she'd been cheating on me with Jake added another layer of betrayal I could use against her in court. The lawyer advised me to prepare for a fight. Emily was not going to go down without throwing punches, especially since she'd already started legal proceedings to claim part of the house we inherited from my parents' estate. The house. That was a whole other mess. Emily had been secretly filing legal papers claiming she'd contributed equally to the purchase, that she was entitled to half of it. I knew she was bluffing, but her arrogance was infuriating. She'd been telling friends she was planning to take everything from me, and I could see her trying to spin her lies into a narrative that she was the victim. I had to be prepared to counter her in court, to prove that she'd been lying about everything: her finances, her fidelity, her motives. Meanwhile, the more I dug, the more I realized she wasn't just cheating and gambling. She was also trying to set herself up for a big payout. I found emails where she was secretly talking to a real estate lawyer about transferring the house into her name or putting it in. Her sister. She'd been planning her escape, I think, even before I uncovered the financial mess. That's when I decided I had to act fast. I contacted my own lawyer and filed for an emergency restraining order on the house to prevent her from doing anything sneaky. I also started documenting her behavior, her tantrums, her lies, her attempts to manipulate others. I wanted everything on record in case it came to a court battle. I knew Emily was good at playing the victim, so I had to make sure I had irrefutable proof of her schemes. I also reached out to a forensic accountant, who confirmed that her gambling addiction was worse than I'd thought. She'd been secretly losing money on online poker and sports betting sites almost every night, sometimes for hours. The amount she'd lost was staggering, close to $250,000 in just a few months. The emotional toll was huge. I'd gone from being a trusting husband to feeling like I'd been living with a con artist. Every time I thought I had a handle on what she was doing, she'd surprise me with another lie or another scheme. It was exhausting. I'd wake up feeling angry, then sad, then furious all over again. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I was so naive. But then I remembered, Love can blind you. I had loved her so much, I ignored the red flags. I told myself I was crazy to think she'd cheat or steal from me, but now I knew better. I started planning my next move. I knew I had to confront her directly, but I wanted to do it carefully. I arranged for a private meeting with her lawyer to see if she was willing to settle out of court. I also prepared a detailed timeline of her lies and her financial crimes, making sure I had everything organized. The goal was to get her to admit what she'd done, or at least to agree to a settlement that would help me recover what I could of the inheritance. But Emily was never one to play fair. At our last discussion, she threw a tantrum claiming I was ruining her life, calling me paranoid, and accusing me of trying to control her. She said she was the victim, that I was the one who had betrayed her by going through her things. That was laughable, considering I had only discovered her secrets by accident. I told her I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore and that I was going to take legal action. That's when she started crying, big crocodile tears, the kind she uses to get her way. But I knew better now. I knew she was a liar and a manipulator. In the back of my mind, I kept thinking about the future. I knew I couldn't trust her anymore, not even a little bit. I had to think about where I'd go from here, how I'd rebuild my life after this betrayal. The house, the inheritance, the marriage, all of it was on the line. I'd never been through something like this before, and honestly, it was terrifying. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized I'd been giving her too much of myself, too much trust, and now I was paying the price. I decided I'd fight for everything I deserved. I was done being the victim. I was going to expose her lies, fight her in court, and reclaim what was rightfully mine. No more Mr. Nice Guy. No more turning the other cheek. This was war, and I was ready to win. I didn't know exactly how it would end, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me anymore. I owed myself that much. The legal battle was about to get ugly, and I knew Emily wouldn't go down without a fight. She had her lawyer, who was sharp and aggressive, and she was already spinning stories to her friends about how I was trying to control her and accuse her of things she didn't do. I could see her playing the victim, as usual. Meanwhile, I worked tirelessly behind the scenes, gathering more evidence, talking to financial experts, and preparing myself for a war I knew would be messy. One of the most shocking things I uncovered during this process was her plan to transfer ownership of the house to her sister. She'd been talking to a shady real estate lawyer about it, trying to make it look like her sister was the rightful owner. I knew I had to stop her before she pulled something that would make everything even more complicated. I filed for an emergency restraining order to freeze any transfer of the property, and I also started preparing my case to prove that she'd been lying about her contributions and her intentions all along. I also decided to confront her directly, but this time with my lawyer present. I wanted her to finally face the facts, her lies, her cheating, her gambling. I sat her down in the living room, and I laid out everything I knew. I told her about the offshore account, the emails with Jake, the secret bank accounts, and her attempt to transfer the house. I saw her flinch a little, but she quickly recovered her bitchy attitude. She told me I was crazy, that I was paranoid, and that I was trying to ruin her life. She accused me of trust issues, even though I had all the proof right there. That's when she got really nasty. She yelled at me, called me possessive, jealous, and insecure. She said she'd never cheated, never gambled away our inheritance, and that I was just trying to control her because I was scared of losing her. I was so furious I almost lost it. I told her she was a liar and a thief, and that I was done listening to her bullshit. I handed her the folder with all the evidence I'd collected, screenshots, bank statements, the Pi's reports, and told her to think about her actions. She looked at the papers, then sneered at me. "You're making a mountain out of a molehill," she spat. "You're just jealous because I found someone better than you." That cut deep. I realized she was trying to gaslight me to make me doubt my own instincts. But I had seen enough. I knew she'd been cheating, stealing, and lying for months. I told her I was going to take her to court, that I was going to get a divorce, and that I'd fight for my rights, my inheritance, my house, my dignity. The emotional toll was overwhelming. I felt betrayed, angry, and exhausted. I kept reviewing everything in my mind, how I'd trusted her, how she'd turned into this manipulative monster. I wondered how I hadn't seen it sooner. I'd been so blind, so in love that I ignored the warning signs. Now I was paying the price, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. This was the end of our marriage, and maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of a new life for me. In the days that followed, I prepared for the court proceedings. I hired a forensic accountant to help me quantify exactly how much money she'd stolen through her gambling and secret accounts. I also made sure to keep detailed records of her behavior, her tantrums, her attempts to manipulate the legal process, her lies. I knew Emily was capable of anything, and I had to be ready for her to pull out all the stops. Meanwhile, she kept trying to spin her lies, turning her friends and family against me. She'd call me possessive, controlling, and say I was crazy for going after her so aggressively. But I didn't care anymore. I knew the truth, and I had the evidence to back it up. I also knew that she'd never admit to her actions willingly. She was a master at deception, and I had to be just as cunning to outsmart her. One night I caught her sneaking her phone again, texting Jake. I was furious. I took a screenshot of the message, which clearly showed her planning their next secret rendezvous. That was the final straw. I sent her a message telling her that I knew everything and that I was done playing her game. I told her I'd see her in court and I'd make sure she paid for her lies and her betrayal. It was at that moment I realized I'd finally taken control of my life again. I was tired of being the victim, tired of being manipulated. I was going to fight for what's mine, my house, my inheritance, my dignity. I'd been betrayed so deeply that I didn't even know who she was anymore. But I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let her destroy me. Not this time. Not after everything I'd been through. The court dates came faster than I expected, and I was both nervous and determined. I had all my evidence organized, everything from the offshore account details, the emails with Jake, the secret bank statements, to the Pies reports showing her meetings with her lover and her gambling losses. I also had a timeline of her lies, documented her attempts to transfer the house, and the legal filings she'd already made. I knew she'd fight hard, probably accuse me of everything she could think of to turn the tide in her favor, but I was ready. On the day of the hearing, I felt a strange mix of anger and relief. I walked into the courtroom knowing I was finally fighting back. Emily was there, looking haughty and bitchy as always, with her lawyer whispering in her ear. She shot me a venomous glare when she saw me, but I kept my composure. I sat through the proceedings, listening to her lawyer try to spin her lies, claiming she was the victim, that I was the one who was paranoid and controlling. I knew better. I had the evidence and I was ready to present it. When it was my turn, I walked up to the stand, handed over the files, and laid out everything. I showed the judge the bank transactions, the offshore account, the emails with Jake, the secret meetings, and her attempts to transfer ownership of the house. I explained how she'd been gambling away our inheritance, how she'd lied about her contributions, and how she'd been planning her escape. I could see Emily's face turning red, her composure slipping. She tried to interrupt, to deny everything, but the judge was having none of it. The judge looked at her with suspicion, then finally addressed her directly. "Ms. Smith, do you deny these allegations?" she asked. Emily hesitated, then tried to deny everything, but her voice cracked. The judge then turned to me and asked if I had anything else to add. I just nodded, and I told her I wanted full custody of the house, a settlement for the stolen inheritance, and a ruling that she was liable for her fraudulent actions. The courtroom was tense, and I could see Emily's face contorting with rage and frustration. She knew she was losing control. When the judge finally made her decision, it was clear. She awarded me full custody of the house, declared that Emily had committed fraud by hiding assets and gambling away our inheritance, and ordered her to pay me a substantial settlement to recover the money she'd stolen. The judge also issued a restraining order, preventing her from transferring the house or accessing our joint accounts without my permission. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I'd won the battle, but the war was far from over. Emily was furious, and I knew she'd try to drag things out in court, appeal, or even retaliate in some way. But I also knew I'd done everything I could to fight for what was rightfully mine. I had reclaimed my house, my inheritance, and my dignity. I felt like I'd finally taken control of my life again. In the aftermath, I started the process of rebuilding. I moved out of the house, found a small apartment, and began therapy to deal with the emotional scars. I reached out to friends and family for support, and I slowly started to piece my life back together. I knew I'd never forget the betrayal, but I also realized I was stronger than I thought. I learned that sometimes you have to fight dirty, play hard, and never give up, especially when you're fighting for your future. Looking back, I see how naive I was to trust her so blindly. Emily was never the person I thought she was. She was manipulative, selfish, and willing to lie, cheat, and steal to get what she wanted. But I also learned that even in the darkest moments, there's a way out. You just have to be willing to face the truth, fight for yourself, and never let someone take everything you've worked for without a fight. I don't regret standing up for myself. If anything, I wish I'd done it sooner, because now I finally feel free. Free from her lies, her betrayal, and her control, and that's the best feeling in the world. In the days after the court ruling, I felt a strange sense of calm I hadn't experienced in years. All the chaos, the lies, the betrayals, they finally seemed to settle into the background. I moved out of the house, took only what I needed, and started fresh. No more pretending everything was okay, no more walking on eggshells, no more feeling like I was living someone else's nightmare. I realized that I had spent so much time trying to save a marriage that was already broken beyond repair. Now, it was about rebuilding myself. I spent time with my family and friends, people who truly cared about me. I started therapy not because I was weak, but because I needed to process everything I'd been through: trust issues, heartbreak, anger, and a deep sense of betrayal. It was a long road, but every day I felt stronger. I began to see that I was capable of surviving anything, even the most painful betrayals. Financially, I managed to recover a significant portion of the inheritance Emily gambled away. The settlement helped me pay off some debts, and I started saving again. I even bought a small condo downtown, far away from the chaos of that house. It was a symbolic move, my new beginning. I learned a lot through this whole ordeal. Never trust blindly, keep your financial life transparent, and always listen to that little voice warning you when something feels off. Looking back, I realize how much I grew from this experience. I learned that some people are just not worth your trust, no matter how much you want to believe in them. I learned to stand up for myself, to fight for what's right, and to never let anyone manipulate or steal from me again. Most importantly, I learned that even in the darkest moments, there's a flicker of hope, a chance to turn everything around if you're willing to face the truth and fight for it. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this: trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, don't ignore it. Be proactive, gather evidence, and stand your ground. Don't let anyone, no matter how charming or convincing, take everything you've worked for or destroy your peace of mind. Life is too short to be spent in betrayal and lies. Fight for yourself, because in the end, that's the only way to truly move forward. And I can tell you from experience, once you do, there's a freedom and strength waiting on the other side that's worth every painful step.